following discussion contains spoilers for the Batman. You have been warned.
And now, your feature presentation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Untitled Spoiler Cast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved. He is Vengeance, Eric Marchin.
Yes, that is my middle name, actually. Eric Vengeance Michael Marchin.
Great.
I know that you're not drinking a Riddler's brew, but you did have a drink that you wanted to share. What is that, Matt?
I think this is probably better suited for the main podcast, but we are putting these spoiler casts on the main feed, even though it's not a numbered episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. It is basically an episode. I got today, Eric. This is our spoiler cast for Batman. No spoilers yet, but we will get into spoilers soon. You guys should check out our spoiler-free review if you haven't seen the movie yet. That's an hour long. Eric and I giving our immediate thoughts. Like, we saw the movie last night. And kind of completely spoiler free. We don't give away really anything.
No.
We have to dance around a lot of stuff. So
we have to bat dance around a lot.
Eric, I have a Starlight limited edition Coca-Cola Zero Sugar. I also have the sugared version in my refrigerator because I bought it for Nevis because she hates diet sodas. It says space inspired. space inspired. It's weird.
What's it taste like?
So they don't tell you. They just say it tastes like space. And I guess maybe I could read the ingredients and you probably get a little bit from there. Concentrate of carrot and black currant. Oh, for color. This isn't telling me anything. It's just a bunch of chemicals. It tastes like a cherry vanilla Coke with a mint aftertaste. It's so weird.
Tastes like space.
Yeah, it's just, that's exactly it. Ask Neil Armstrong. like he would know.
That's what Stanley Kubrick was thinking when he was making 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I bet you he drank a lot of Starlight Coca-Cola.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
And it's disgusting. Like, I'm not a vanilla Coke guy at all. Like, I don't like vanilla Coke. Love cherry Coke. I can deal with a cherry vanilla because I can deal with the cherry.
Right.
I don't love the vanilla part. And then the aftertaste.
Do you like vanilla and other stuff? Like, do you like vanilla
yeah.
in like an iced coffee or something?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, I'll do a vanilla oat milk sometimes, like an unsweetened vanilla. Like, I like the flavor of vanilla, just not in my Coca-Cola.
Yeah. I mean, you are super vanilla.
That's also very, very true. And then the mint, like, it's like a tingly mint aftertaste, which is like, just does not go with a Coca-Cola at all. So the first couple sips were fine. And then the more I was drinking it, the more I was like, this is pretty disgusting. But if there's a weird flavor of soda or Coke coming out, I'm going to try it. So
what was that?
It was from the normal Coke Zero.
Was that your Riddler impression?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we already reviewed The Batman. Our spoiler-free review is out on podcast services, YouTube, everywhere. You guys can check that out. That will have our score on it. Eric gave it a 4 out of 5. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. So this isn't necessarily a review, but we just wanted to kind of talk about the movie with our bat gloves off, where we can talk about anything we want. I don't know if we'll go through the whole plot because we might be here for the entire weekend.
We'll be for a 3 hour for a nearly 3 hour movie, we'll be here for like 6.
So I don't know if we're going to go like plot point by plot point, but like we'll probably elaborate on a lot of the stuff we talked about in the main review. So like we can talk about, how Batman and Bruce Wayne is connected to this. We can talk about the Riddler with like every little detail about his riddles and how ridiculous he is, or how much you think the ridiculousness was fun. Or we can talk about, the twist of the villain that they teased at the end, or, the state of Gotham at the end of this movie. So again, I haven't said anything yet. If you haven't seen this movie, please please exit out of this and then go back and
Yes,
listen to
exit
us
out of
later.
this and then go instead and listen to our spoiler-free review of No Exit, which we did not
Yeah, yeah,
like.
yeah. Why would you do that? I don't think you should.
Well, you can listen to our review still.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please support us everywhere. But we will be starting spoilers, so last chance, please please bail out now. If you don't care, I mean, sucks to be you, I guess. I don't know. Like, I guess who cares? It's up to you. Okay, spoilers. Eric, where do you want to start? Do you want to go right into that character that they teased at the end, or do you want to go
Let's
into
do it
something else?
because that is the out of anything in this movie, I truly felt that that was the worst scene of the film because it feels like you're watching a YouTube fan video that was made,
It's pretty harsh,
which
but like
is
I don't disagree with you.
it
But
almost like even though it's obviously not like the same sort of direction and style, but it reminded me a lot of. Do you remember that video, that fan made video of Batman versus the Predator and Alien that was
sure,
on
yeah.
YouTube?
Mhm.
That's the level I think of
Like an epic rap battle of history.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
So the movie, let's just go right into that because I think that's the biggest spoilery thing is like, it's not even a post-credit sequence. It's a sequence right before the last scene of the film. Riddler is captured. He's in Arkham Asylum. He is mad that the Batman kind of not really foiled his plan because the Riddler did accomplish what he kind of wanted to do, but not to its complete kind of fullness. But like Gotham is flooded. The Riddler's kind of freaking out a bit in the very over the top way that Eric loved.
No.
And then and then you hear a voice, a familiar voice. If I mean, to some people, I don't think to many people, but it
Well,
is the voice of
fans of Killing of a Sacred Deer will know who that
Will.
is right
I'm wearing
away.
my A24 sweater,
Yeah.
so like this is
Well,
A24
he's in.
Batman.
I mean, he was in the Green Knight most
Yeah,
recently.
exactly.
So.
Barry Keoghan. So you hear Barry Keoghan's voice. It sounds like a voice that you think it is, and then you're like, he's the Joker, and you're like, huh. And then
Well, he first gives he gives the Riddler a question, which is the
Sure.
Joker, like the two cards in the deck that are most valuable,
Sure.
but also don't have value. And then Paul Dano's response, delivered beautifully in an Oscar-worthy performance, is
I liked it.
Friend.
Paul Dano is very over the top. I liked it. Eric didn't. Go listen to our spoiler-free review because I think we both have interesting perspectives on it that are both valid.
Yeah.
In this part, I agree with you that this scene does not work for me at all. And I think the biggest, I'm of two minds of it because I think, and we'll get into all the dirty details, but I think where Reeves leaves this movie is really interesting because Gotham is in shambles. It's flooded. Basically it's
It's a
set up a lot
cesspool
like,
now.
yeah, it's literally a cesspool, but if you look at think of New York City, of how Manhattan's kind of in the middle and you have the other boroughs around it. Basically the Manhattan of Gotham is underwater. And basically up to the roof of what is Gotham Square Garden, which is like a Madison Square Garden. So think of that from the water level. And that's a really interesting spot to leave this movie. And then on top of that, you go to this scene with the Riddler. I like how he does not die. I will say that. I know you don't love the character or I mean the portrayal of the character in this, Eric, but like I will say that I like that, we don't just kill every villain. And I know Batman movies don't necessarily do that, but like
Not no, like the
there's been so many iterations. Yeah.
Jack Nicholson's Joker was killed by Batman, and then
Sure.
Two-Face was killed by Val Kilmer's Batman.
Yeah. Penguin dies in the second one.
Penguin also dies.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then in the Nolan ones, Ra's al Ghul dies.
Two-Face
Joker dies.
No, Joker lives.
Doesn't live. Sorry, but it doesn't come back because of
Two-Face dies, breaks his neck.
Two-Face. Yeah. So, anyways, I like that. You can tell that Reeves is world building here, and he wants to get to these second and third movies with all of these villains still around. Like build up Arkham Asylum, build up these villains, the Rogue Gallery. And the one thing I like with the Joker in this movie, I don't like how the scene plays out. I don't necessarily love Barry Keoghan's delivery and his laugh. But the one thing I do like is like, okay, I like the idea of the Joker just being already established in this universe. I like the idea of the Joker being involved with that rogues gallery in the way that he is in the comics, because they're all around at all the times. With the movies, don't necessarily do this because you can't have 400 actors playing all the different villains necessarily. But I think, Marvel's proven that, you can have these giant ensembles and make them work. So keeping Dano alive as the Riddler, I think is a great choice. And having the Joker now being this person who's going to manipulate some of these other villains, this is just me hypothesizing where the franchise might go, I think could be cool. But then on the other side of that, I'm like, do we fucking need the Joker again? I'm like, I'm like, it's almost frustrating because you're like, Reeves, like, I love you, dude. You made a great movie. I can't wait to see what you do in the second and third ones. But I'm like, do we need to go back to that well? Because we've seen the Nicholson Joker. We've seen the Nolan Joker.
Heath
We've
Ledger,
seen
yeah.
Heath Ledger. Sorry. Yeah. Heath Ledger's Joker.
Caesar Romero.
Caesar Romero. We've seen fucking Jared Leto, and like every Batman has a Joker. And I get that he's his arch nemesis. You can't get away from it, but dude, I don't think we needed that to be the tease. Like, I would be way more excited to get a Hugo Strange tease because you're in Arkham, or Court of Owls, which there are Easter eggs for both of those villains in this movie in the form of Riddler's cards that he's sending Batman. And just to go back to the Joker again and have that be the teaser, just like it was at the end of Batman Begins. And, just like it, I mean, we got it, the Suicide Squad first, but obviously that version of Joker was very heavily involved with Batman right away. Like, you're introducing Joker so early. And I'll let you go in a sec, Eric, because I know you also didn't like this scene, but like, I was thinking about it today and I'm like, I might be okay with it if Joker isn't the villain in the second movie and then he is the third movie.
Well, you could make him almost like, again, like if you've read Bram Stoker's Dracula, or if you've seen like a lot of the original, like the Bela Lugosi or even Nosferatu, Dracula in the story is never really present.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the one thing that they are trying to do a little bit with the Riddler in this, and what they could do as well with Joker moving forward, is they could make him like Moriarty or Blofeld, where he's more of a presence. And that's what Dracula was as well, because the way that Dracula is built up in the minds of the other characters is that the other characters talk about him in a way. And Nolan's The Dark Knight even does touch upon that a little bit with the opening heist sequence where all the other guys are like, who are we working for? It's like, oh, I hear he wears makeup. And like, I mean, that
and you get that in this with the Joker gang kind of at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're obviously very clearly supporters or part of his crew, right?
Or just, I mean, they could just be, I mean, like they almost looked a little bit like the gangs that you did find in the Joel Schumacher Batmans as well.
I agree, but I think it was just very
raves.
clear with the kind of smile and like the imitating the scarring on the cheeks. That to me, it felt very clear that was a nod to the Joker gang, and then having him already being established in this universe of already being in Arkham. I feel
he
like
just exists. He's but Heath Ledger's Joker was the same thing, where like he was just there. Like you don't need to have, the origin story of him falling into a vat of chemicals and then turning into the Joker, even though, I mean, I do like Jack Nicholson's Joker, but I think my biggest problem with it is how it's filmed and how the performance is. But and I like Barry Keoghan a lot. I think, like, mentioning Killing of a Sacred Deer, like I think he is very good at playing
unsettling,
sinister and unnerving characters. Even in The Green Knight, he's kind of a little bit
you always even
iffy.
In Eternals.
Yeah. But with this, it kind of almost felt like, even the way that they were framing him, I wonder if they'll go with him with the next movie or not. Like, it was almost because they shot in Europe, where it's like, oh, who can we get this kind of a name that we could kind of get as like a, maybe even a stand-in? Not to say that he's not good enough or recognized enough.
But you don't think that they're maybe committed, or not necessarily he's signed on for 3 movies?
Yeah, because I think the way that you see him in this film, it's almost like,
You would have showed him if he was the actor you were going
Yeah,
for.
and at one point so another thing in what happens in this movie is Riddler sends a card to Alfred, or it's addressed to Bruce Wayne, but Alfred
Yeah.
opens it and it explodes, and Alfred is in the hospital.
I thought they were just gonna murk Alfred that
I
early.
did too, and I was kind of hoping they were, not
I
because
know. I love Andy Serkis and I love Alfred the character, but I just think it would have been an interesting choice to just kill off
yeah,
Alfred that
because like
quickly.
another character they could have brought in afterwards, and I almost thought that the character was introduced, but it's not
Is
her.
Barbara Gordon?
Well, no, is Leslie Tompkins,
Oh, right.
who's
From
kind of like the medic who kind
yeah,
of looks after in a lot of the comic books, and in even the 90s animated series. The three people that are kind of always Batman's kind of group are Lucius Fox,
Lucius. Yeah,
Alfred, and Leslie is kind of the medic of the group. She's a doctor, and she's the one that does more of the patching up and keeping Bruce healthy for the most part. But when Circus is in
who played her in this? It was
it, but it wasn't her. That
no.
wasn't the
Oh yeah,
character. It was
sorry. You
just it
thought it
was I
was.
thought
Yeah,
it was, and like I was
yeah.
thinking, oh, like maybe that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna kill Alfred off, and they're gonna bring her in, and they didn't do that. But that's my own sort of, again, projections of what.
The servant had a servant. in
Well,
this.
they're not servants.
I
They're
know.
more.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
just you know what I mean. I'm just
but
making
yeah,
fun.
but going back to where I also thought this was going, I almost thought that Reeves was going to connect the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, because when he's in the hospital bed, Alfred, and says like, oh, like your parents, like 20, he talks about like what, 20 years ago, like that they were killed, and like,
There's only 10, I think.
oh, 10. I thought he said
No,
20.
no, 20 because he was 30. He would have been 30 and he was 10 when it happened. So yeah, it is like 20 years
Yeah,
later, I
and
think.
so I thought that was going to be the big reveal, that like that Joker was going to be a part of it, and that's how they would continue on that Joker, because
He
that
just have to
movie
be
was
hella
so
older.
popular. Yeah, which you could still make that work, but
Just wear
um
makeup and green hair, yeah.
yeah, and it
I'm
didn't
glad
go
they
there.
didn't do that.
Oh,
I'm
I
glad they
am
didn't.
too, but
Yeah.
I kind of thought for a moment they were going to do that, just because that movie was so popular, and it's like,
Sure.
how can we keep that character going? But they don't, and obviously they don't, because the actors that play Martha and Thomas Wayne aren't the actors that played
Yeah.
or Thomas Wayne in Joker. So um watching that scene, though, it just felt so ham-fisted and the most fan servicey moment, where like I do think that like the end of the Batman is actually very similar to Batman Begins, because it's all about basically restarting. Because the end of Batman Begins, you have Wayne Manor burnt down to the ground and him rebuilding it again. And then
No,
with
here
this,
it's
you have
Gotham.
Gotham
Yeah.
completely decimated, and them kind of rebuilding again, and looking at it from the point of view of also being a metaphor with sort of, taking the systematic corruption and racism and crime
A
that,
fresh
that
start for Gotham.
exactly. And it was the same thing with Batman Begins, where at the end of Batman Begins, you have Wayne Manor destroyed, and it's a chance to restart again. And that actually, continuity wise, carries into the Dark Knight, when Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne and Batman is living in this weird kind of like makeshift underground bunker, when he's not in a penthouse hotel. And then the other thing that is similar to Christopher Nolan stuff as well is that one scene with Andy Serkis. I think the time delineage thing does very much play out the way that like a Nolan twist would in one of his movies, where it's like it's already
Yeah,
happened.
it's already happened as you're finding out with the flashbacks and things like that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where they go if Joker will just be the villain in the second one. I have a weird feeling that it's more of what you're talking about, of the Moriarty kind of thing, of like Joker will be a presence, but I think he'll be locked up in Arkham, and like even if he might be in the next movie, whether it's Barry Keoghan or not, but like I don't think he's going to be much like this movie. Like I don't think he's going to be the main villain. I think they'll take their time with that, and I hope they take their time with that and build that relationship up and build that character up, instead of just, I think, blowing their load and just going into Joker right away.
Yeah.
And I feel like because you've introduced him in this movie, okay, have him be a presence in the next one with Arkham, build up that rogues gallery in Arkham, build up Arkham to be a thing, and then have him escape in the third one and be the villain. Like, I think that
That's
could
when
be
you let
really,
the
really
clown out
cool.
of the box, right?
Yeah, and then by that time we'll be, 6 years down the line probably, because we're probably going to get a new one of these every 3 years, and
God, we'll be
like,
nearing our
um,
40s by that point.
yeah, isn't that, yeah, that's not cool. But but yeah, I guess so will Robert Pattinson. He's basically the same age as us, but um I think they will do a time jump, and it's interesting because there is a Scott Snyder arc, and I know I referenced him in our spoiler free review, and I feel like he got a thank you in the credits, and so did a lot of different Batman writers and people who've worked on DC comics and things like that. But Scott Snyder specifically, like, I want to give him a shout out because he was the guy who got me back into Batman comics about a decade ago. Like, I picked up I remember I got embarrassed about, being a nerd in high school, and like I wanted to be a cool kid. So like I stopped reading comics, and like, I tried out for the hockey team, even though like I still played video games and liked all my nerdy shit, but like it was more like, I didn't want people to know kind of thing. And then when I got into college, and like even 10 years ago when I was in my early 20s, is like I was like, fuck this. Like, I'm going to start reading comics again. Like, why did I ever stop doing that? So, like, I went back to the comic shop, and I was like, well, Batman and Spider-Man are my dudes. Let's find out what's going on right now. And then, Scott Snyder was a young up and coming writer, and he had Detective Comics. And I was like, all right, I'm going to jump into Detective Comics. I'm like, or I think I jumped in a little bit before that, and it was like the death of Bruce Wayne. So like they just killed off Bruce Wayne, and he was like traveling through time to try and get back to present day or some shit. It was like there was like dinosaur Batman and stuff like that. It was very weird. So Dick Grayson was the Batman in the Batman comics when I first started, and then Scott Snyder did a arc called The Black Mirror, which was about James Jr., so James Gordon's son, being a serial killer around Gotham. And like there was kind of a mystery to that, and it was very dark, I remember, and disturbing. And I think a lot of inspiration for this Joker, or not Joker, Riddler, was kind of put with that version of James Jr. from the comics. And then there's an arc called 0 Year that Scott Snyder did in 2013, where they kind of rebooted Batman for the new 52. And this was kind of a pseudo origin story for this version of Batman. And it involves like the Riddler flooding Gotham like he does at the end of this movie. And I was just surprised that they went there. Like, I think that's such an interesting, you know, the decimation of Gotham like that at the end of this movie, where the Riddler kind of wins. He doesn't ultimately, but like he does cause an incredible amount of destruction, and to the point where it really transforms Gotham to being this completely different place. And there's a really cool voiceover at the end, and where they set up the kind of stakes of where Gotham is even in a lower point than the movie started. And I think that's just really, really cool, and something that these Batman movies hasn't really done to that city. So that's something that it's doing differently, and I like that. And then what Reeves did in his two Apes movies that were kind of in that sort of post-apocalyptic, and it's not that the earth is in a post-apocalyptic thing, but Gotham almost is, where I'll be interested to see where he takes the Batman character with the city in that state. So I will say, like, I liked where the movie ended up with Gotham.
Yeah, I mean, Gotham right now is almost like what New York was in the late 70s, early 80s, where it's crime infested. Like, it's like that caricature where you see in a lot of horror B movies and sort of like films that were made at that time, where like everything is dirty and gross, there's crime everywhere, the city streets at night are not safe, and that's kind of where you are from the beginning of the movie. And at the end
It's
it's
even
like,
worse.
again, it does have the biblical reference of like the flood coming to, clean everything
Well,
up
it's at
and
its
drown
lowest, but
the
it's a fresh
sinners. But
start.
it's
Yeah.
almost like Noah, right, in that way, where it's like, the sins of the past will be, cleansed by the water. And with that, like, that's something I think Matt Reeves seems to also have a kind of fascination with when it comes to, integrating certain aspects of theology into his films. And um yeah, I think the third act works on that level. I had some problems with where the set piece where you have the Riddler at one point has been apprehended. You've seen some of those clips in the trailer where, like, he's in Arkham Asylum and he's talking to Batman between a two-way cell. But there's a scene that's kind of like, again, like the third act of the Dark Knight, where even though the Joker is apprehended, his ace in the hole in that movie was Harvey. Riddler's ace in the hole in the Batman is his disciples and followers. He has at least 500 of them. He's harnessed social media and things that are
What's
not
up, guys?
yeah.
I thought that was really funny.
That is the one thing I did like, where I wish almost it was like that more, where it was almost kind
He's
of
like a weird online streamer kind of guy.
pathetic,
Like,
more
yeah,
pathetic and goofy, instead of being kind of like I think Matt Reeves thinks he's like really creepy and sinister, and I think that if you kind of played him more as kind of just a goofball who people are taking seriously, I think that's
like socially awkward kind of
I
thing.
think that's more
like,
threatening than being unassuming,
It
and
was
he even
really
talks
funny because
about
it's just like
being
it's like
unassuming.
people who are like live streaming and you're like, yo, what's up, guys? It's me,
Yeah.
your boy, the Riddler. I'm here. Like, and
It's
I'm like, oh,
Riddles
man.
93.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, it's just the way they nailed that part of it. And
Yeah.
that was genuinely unsettling as you're seeing their messages about where to buy assault rifles and where to buy the clothing, and like the live streaming element of him talking to these people who he's radicalized, and like that I felt was, and even the what's up, guys is like over the top in a way, but like is in it was
but it's
just,
in his own voice.
yeah.
It's kind of like again, it just that works so much better, and I wish that that's how they kind of went
Sure.
with it, because again, they set this character up through the whole time that he has no identity, that he's a no one, that he's basically like an incel for a lot of the movie, and I don't think it really matters what his voice sounded like. I mean, if there's no real sort of like footprint of him as a person anywhere, because he is an orphan, and he's kind of like the flip side of the coin of Bruce, where like his chip on his shoulder is that he feels that all these rich people, specifically Bruce Wayne, who became an orphan, really wasn't an orphan. And he has a point, I think, when it comes to the idea that like there's a lot of people that don't have parents, or that have to grow up in the foster care system, that are lost because they don't have proper funding. They like there's a point being
Especially when
made
it's
there.
promised to you and then taken away, or
Yeah.
like, or
And there's a like there is something there that I think is that he has a point. I don't agree with any of his ideology or anything like that, but in
it's
terms
just
of
like
Bruce
anything,
Wayne being an orphan, like Bruce Wayne was going to be okay. Like, yeah,
I know.
Bruce Wayne
And then
was going to be
everyone put
okay
the focus on
financially.
Bruce. Yeah, everyone put the focus on Bruce and no one cared. And I liked that motivation.
Yeah.
I do like the misdirection of him figuring out Bruce Wayne as Batman, and then not actually knowing that he's Batman, because I always prefer, like, I hate when the villain can figure that shit out right away, even though maybe it's unbelievable because this guy's supposed to be always one step ahead and smarter than everyone. But
and also Batman basically tells every woman he's dating at one point or another that he's Bruce Wayne.
Oh, totally. But I mean, like, when the villains, like, he doesn't tell Catwoman in this,
No,
right?
no. But in most other movies, or Alfred does, because that was the controversy in Batman '89 when Alfred brought Kim Basinger's Vicky Vale into the Batcave.
Yeah, and like, what the hell, bro?
Yeah, it's like Alfred would be fired at that
I will say,
point.
I love the look of the Batcave in this, in the underground subway. It reminded me of the Ninja Turtles lair from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It's pretty good.
And I was like, anytime you go into an abandoned subway station that is like has the design of like a either European or old like New York style of like the big bombastic beautiful subway stations. Like I love that his bat cave, and I'm like, is it still under Wayne Manor? Did they have a subway stop at their house? I'm like, because
I mean, it doesn't surprise me.
it
is
said
Wayne
Wayne's
Manor.
it said Wayne Station on it, which is usually I would have thought under Wayne Tower, but it seemed like it was under Wayne Manor. And I'm like, that's dope to have a subway station under your house. I'm like, that's fantastic. Even if maybe it was a private one, which is even cooler. I love the look of the Bat Cave.
But I wanted to
Thought
go
that
back
was
quickly
awesome.
to the thing
Sorry,
that didn't
yeah,
work
tangent.
for
Yeah.
me. No, digressions are fine with this. We'll probably have many more. So the scene that I kind of felt clumsily kind of put together from like a narrative point of view, and even the way that it's edited and what his motivations were in that one moment, is when you see Batman who pummels one of Riddler's disciples that's not Paul Dano, but is funnily enough, like I was thinking, oh, is like the twist going to be Paul Dano has a twin? Because there's a scene before where the police apprehend him, and you've seen that in the trailer in the opening scene at the cafe or the diner.
Yeah.
And there's two cards when they open the cards, and he's got two IDs. And I was thinking, oh, does he have a twin brother? Is that and when after Batman's pummeled this guy, and because you think also Paul Dano's got to get beaten up at some point,
Which he doesn't really.
no.
Right?
So
No.
that was the
Good
one
for him.
surprising thing.
That was
like
in his
when
contract.
Sean Bean dies in movies,
Yeah.
Paul Dano gets beaten up. But when Batman goes to save the people that are caught under all the stadium trappings and stuff like that, he looks up at this electric box, and I was thinking, oh, is he going to sacrifice himself to keep that from hitting the water and electrocuting the people? But he grabs this piece of hanging cord and then cuts it off and falls in the water, and then you're like, okay, what was the point of that? And then he comes out of the water fine, and then he goes to help the people with the flare, and you've seen that also in the trailer. And I just felt that was clumsily put together, like he was trying to make
that.
up
I think
for
that is
beating
what
the guy.
he's doing. Like he ultimately didn't know. Like that's what was going to happen. Was the electrical wire was going to hit the water and kill everyone in Gotham Square Garden that's flooding. So I think I thought the same thing, but I guess because he just falls into the water and he
It
instantly
didn't
gets
feel
up,
like a
it's
time sensitive situation though. Like it didn't feel
Right.
like, oh,
or
I've got to
that big
get
of a
down there.
heroic moment.
Yeah, like I got to get, like it almost felt to me like he was trying to make up for the fact that he just beat this guy, to a pulp. And that's something that he has constantly been preaching to Catwoman, that you don't want to, go to the point where you can't return, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean, I thought he was always pretty brutal. It's just he wouldn't
no.
kill
I mean,
someone.
again, in the trailer and in the scene where he's fighting the gang, the one guy that he beats,
like he just like
he literally pummels to the point
Yeah.
of almost, to death. There's something there with, like, again, unresolved issues with the character, that he doesn't have this kind of filter to kind of like tell him you need to stop. But the way that scene plays from that's how I interpreted it. And when you're watching the movie, you don't get the necessarily like, I got to get down there and get those people out because that thing's going to drop at 5 seconds. It's like, it's just like, oh,
it's a little understated. Yeah, it's just there and then happens and then that's it. And then
yeah, it's like, oh shit,
yeah.
I've got to make amends for the shitty thing I just did. Those people need help. I'll do that to make up for beating the shit out of this guy.
I will even say, like, the stakes in general, maybe never felt that high. Like, to the point of like, yeah, he's a serial killer and he's murdering one person at a time, and then there's so many
specific
people in the movie,
too,
like,
right? Like,
yeah, and they're all
cops
corrupt
and
people and
dirty
politicians
DAs
and like I like that, and it kept escalating, and you're getting rid of the people you need to get rid of, like the mayor and the commissioner, so that way
and Peter Sarsgaard's DA.
Yeah. So you can get Harvey Dent in there, which will probably be in the next movie, right? And like, I like all that kind of stuff, but I did feel like even with the flooding at the end, where I'm like, holy shit, like I just did not expect this. Are they going to kill thousands of people in Gotham? Like I never felt like, even though I like where the movie ends up with Gotham, I never felt like a sense of like, oh fuck, he's really fucking shit up now, or he's killing a lot of people. Like I think it is disturbing with the Riddler, followers coming in and with their assault rifles setting up on the rafters and trying to lure everyone into a stadium to shoot them. Like it is, I think in 2022, like uncomfortable and
especially with
and
after like the taking
yeah,
of the Capitol and things
yeah,
like that.
and
And
even more horrific things it's just that stuff hits a little bit differently, and I know that's intentional. The movie's obviously doing that very intentionally.
people
But
do
yeah,
get hurt and killed, and I think that's
absolutely, yeah,
another point that the movie makes right at the beginning with that opening voiceover, that it commits to, again, with the film noir sort of narrative style, is that Batman can't be everywhere all at once. And even though criminals are now starting to become afraid of, the Batman, targeting them, there's still going to be crime, and there's still going to be murder, and there are things that, like, the Batman can't do. He's not a super powered
can't be
hero.
everywhere. Yeah,
Exactly. And even with the flooding, like it shows you, like, he can help as much as he can, but he necessarily can't save everybody. And that also goes to the main theme of who Batman and Bruce Wayne is, that, he felt helpless in a moment where he couldn't save his parents, and now he's trying to do as much as he can in order to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And I think, Matt Reeves does overemphasize that a little bit with the
the
one
kid.
politician's son
Yeah,
going back to him a couple of times. And
it's kind of like the James Jr. moment in the Nolan
or
movies, right?
even the actor who played Joffrey in Game of Thrones in the first movie, where, like, you
That's
see,
who I was referencing.
well,
Isn't
no, no,
that
no, no,
James
no,
Jr.?
it's not. James Jr.
Oh,
is in the second movie.
with Two-Face and
Yeah,
shit, right?
so
Yeah,
the kid in the first one is just a kid who lives in
right.
the boroughs, and
Thought it
like,
was the same thing. It was same kid. Yeah.
but he, like, when Batman's kind of like climbing up
Yeah,
the
oh, I know
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. And so
that's
with,
who I was referencing. So I was getting two characters messed up.
yeah, I mean, they're both kids, they're both blonde hair, I'm sure they're both
Young white
British.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, they all look the
It's
same.
like-
Let's just be real. But yeah, like they really emphasize that, like, obviously that's kind of part of, instead of showing Bruce's parents get killed, we'll show you a reflection of, like, oh,
yeah,
he can empathize with this kid who's just gone through something. But then we'll go back to it again at the funeral, when he has his big hero moment of saving the
as
kid from being
Bruce. Yeah,
hit by the car. And then, like, even little things that I think kind of annoyed me a little bit, that aren't necessarily great, are like, people getting high off of these eye drops, and they
drops.
call them droppers, and it's just like, man, it's so
Again,
silly.
see, that's I know, but then that's the stuff that I kind of just embrace. And
But again, like, I mean, that's also real life too, where it's like, people are called druggies or tweakers or
totally. I
things like
just
that.
to me,
But
it's a
it's
comic book
silly
version
when it's
of
done
that.
in a studio film, because it kind of almost feels like, again, overthought or overwritten, where it's like, oh, we call them droppers, or even some of the
Guy had a cool drop mask at the beginning when he was walking
or
around.
even some of the people that are talking about sort of like the way Gotham is. Like, there's this funeral sequence for this mayoral candidate.
Yeah, some of the dialogue's not great. I will 100% agree with you.
And it's like, like, this town
Heavy-handed, or
yeah,
like,
like, it sounds like it's something that would be used
but
in
then
a
that goes,
video game,
or a comic book, Eric.
yeah, but
Like
or just
that's what I
just badly written in general.
yeah, that's what I mean. But a lot of comic books are. That's what I'm trying to sort of argue and sort of defend the movie for it. Like, and I agree with you. It's not great. There's many times. There's some scenes with Catwoman in the Iceberg Lounge, and there's times throughout the whole movie where I'm like, that doesn't sound completely right. But you know what it does sound like?
A comic book
Book.
movie.
Yeah.
But
And
then
I'm like,
again, the movie is also trying to be something, like you mentioned, the stuff with the Riddler's, sort of
sure,
again,
followers and stuff like
followers
that. Yeah.
being something that is hearkening to, school shootings, to,
Yeah.
Trump supporters, not all Trump supporters, but like the kind of like far right
Extremist versions.
extremists,
Yeah.
and what we've been experiencing. And it's like, okay, so you want to do that, that's great. I think that's fine to interject that stuff, but then you also want to
More
be,
comic book ridiculous. Yeah,
yeah,
I get, and to me, I think it balanced those things, and I think both sides work. But I totally understand what you're saying of that, like those things clash, like
yeah.
and don't work sometimes.
I
So
think
like,
I think sometimes it can work. Like, I think the one time it works where it's actually funny and it's a visual pun is the Riddler leaving the thumb drive. I actually thought that was
very
very
funny. The
in a
thumb drive
morbid
is
way,
great.
but also the way that scene was played between Batman and Gordon
Yeah.
wasn't played jokingly. It was played
No.
completely straight, and that's what made it funny.
But they were aware of the pun. and
Yeah,
I
but
think
the way that
helps, but, like,
the way that they address
they're almost
it,
rolling their eyes at
yeah,
that
and that's
point,
what
'cause,
makes
like,
it
is
funny.
yes, absolutely. And, like, we don't need to talk about every single, saw trap that, Jigsaw puts together in this movie, but, like,
But the mouse maze is the one that is the
very
most
Saw-like, and it absolutely,
Jigsaw-esque.
Eric, I know telepathically watching the movie, I had that conversation with you.
Yeah.
Like, I knew exactly that was gonna come up, and obviously, as a huge fan of Saw, really into it. But I like seeing that in a Batman movie, and I'm like, it's so elaborate, it's so silly, it is over the top, and like each riddle was ridiculous and I love the escalation from each one and who they were tied to and
Escalation.
how Batman would figure out that one and then move on to the next thing. Like I really bought into him, maybe not necessarily being the world's best detective, but like of being the smartest person in the room and just really dedicating his life to this shit and just like really being passionate about it. And I think that's what Robert Pattinson, as this brooding, like obsessive Batman, I thought, was really, really cool. The Catwoman stuff, did you like that? So the other big thing there is that Catwoman in this, Selena Kyle, is Carmine Falcone's daughter, which I don't think is like usually canon. It could be
No,
maybe in
but there
some
are
places, but
references. Oh, so that's the other thing we should mention as well. So this story takes place between October 31st and November 6th. So the course of this mayoral election,
you could say it's a
these.
long Halloween.
Well, that's the thing that it is referencing quite a
Well,
bit. There's
yeah.
one shot of when Selena Kyle scratches Carmine Falcone's face, and he has the three scratches on the cheek
Yeah.
that are the three scratches that Catwoman gave him
yeah.
in the Long Halloween. But I think they were there like almost from the beginning,
Yeah.
and like he just kind of always had
You can
it.
see there's a lot from that too, as mentioned, the Scott Snyder stuff.
But
that I
the family tree there, I didn't have a problem with that. I honestly it's fine. Like I think
no,
that,
I
like,
was fine with it too.
like I
yeah.
could see some purists being like, oh, like why do we have to have
Them
Catwoman and
connected, yeah.
connected? It's like, who cares? Like I think it works just because it's an excuse
For the
to
plot
have,
of this movie.
and also just to have more John Turturro, who I think is who gives the best performance in this film, because he is the kind of criminal Gotham deserves. He is somebody who is menacing, intimidating, but he's also soft spoken.
Yeah, just a nasty piece of shit, but like
he's very
behind the
intelligent.
scenes, yeah.
And the way he's so manipulative, like the way that he talks to Bruce Wayne as almost as if he's like, a distant relative, and
Yeah.
he's almost very kind to him in a lot of ways, and kind of almost uses like, oh, I knew you as a kid, to kind of manipulate him. I think Turturro is one of those guys who often goes unsung, and when he's good, he's this, and when he's over the top and fun, he can be great in Coen Brothers movies. Like
Sure.
even Adam Sandler films, he can be kind of like the best
Sure.
thing in
Yeah.
those movies, or at
I
least
forgot
enjoyable.
he's in a lot of those. Yeah.
But I loved him in this film, and I
thought
think
he was
is
great,
the
yeah.
best the best villain. The other thing I wanted to talk about, that I could not give a suspension of disbelief to, is there's a scene where Batman is knocked unconscious and is in police custody, and I think in that one moment where he blacks out and he wakes up in a holding cell with all the police, I think between the blacking out and him waking
Someone
up,
would have unmasked him. Yeah.
there's
I
no
remember.
way that he would have,
Yeah.
like, Gordon could have protected him. And even Gordon, I think, would have been like, even if Gordon could have kept him from all the other police, I think Gordon would have found out who he was.
Absolutely agree.
So I think that's kind of like, okay, like even for a
It is
comic book movie,
yeah.
it's hard to believe that would.
That is a big suspension of disbelief. It is, and I don't mean this as an insult, a little nitpicky, but it is big enough to be like noticeable. Where I think like most people won't think twice about it, but like I think if you're thinking with logical means, you're like, there's no way that they would have not looked at his face.
Yeah.
But then you go back to like, it still would be pretty obvious that this is Bruce Wayne. Like, it's just
True.
like, so you kind of just, I don't know. In a movie like this, again, I don't want to give it a pass for all of these things of like that you're saying, because I think everything you've brought up is totally fair. But sometimes you just go, yeah, okay. I guess you just needed to get to that point and you couldn't figure out a better way to do so.
Yeah,
Which
what
is
I do
unfortunate.
really like with talking about like the family tree and lineage is how they tarnish the
The
Wayne
Waynes.
legacy, specifically Thomas Wayne. I
Which
think
they've done a
Martha,
lot lately in different stories.
yeah,
Like,
Martha Wayne, they're very sympathetic towards her. So you learn that Thomas Wayne was running for mayor and that he creates this fund called the Renewal Fund, that even if he loses the candidacy or becoming mayor in the voting, that this fund that is going to be $1 billion pot will be there to help Gotham in the
Gotham, yeah.
future and clean up the city and things like that. And that basically becomes this kind of uh basically like hog
Yeah,
like
like
what
pot of gold that
gold
everyone
for
kind
all
of,
the
yeah.
crime bosses, and you find
Yeah.
out that Carmine is basically the mayor running, the whole city.
City since his death, yeah.
But with a lot of that stuff, you think to yourself, okay, like Thomas Wayne has always been, this, in other versions, like the heart of the city, the guy that, like, oh, the fallen son, the way that like JFK Jr. is
Sure.
portrayed, or a Kennedy in general. And in this, he still is that, and it is very kind of simplistic in how he's corrupted, because it's like politics corrupt absolutely, or absolute, in that Thomas Wayne turns to Carmine Falcone to help him because a reporter has discovered or dug up files on Martha Wayne's medical history, and specifically her time in institutions. And so Thomas Wayne wants to protect Martha. So the only way that he can figure out to do that is to go to Carmine, and Carmine wants to do as much as possible, as much damage as possible to this reporter, because he will then use that to blackmail Thomas Wayne. And Thomas Wayne, being a billionaire, is the perfect person you want to have, the unlimited resources and funds. And
Mhm.
so, you look at Thomas Wayne and the decision he makes there. I almost wish they went a little bit further, that Thomas Wayne was maybe even a little bit more kind of
Guilty.
guilt. Yeah, because
Yeah.
like the there's still nobility in his like why what he was doing and why he was doing it, where you have Peter Skarsgård's, DA, you have the mayoral candidate, they kind of seem to be a little bit more sleazier and like into, having affairs and, cashing in on bonuses, where Thomas Wayne, even though he goes to the dark side, he does it for reasons that are understandable, that aren't just like, oh, like he didn't, I mean, because obviously he doesn't need money, but he did it for protecting somebody he cares about, where it's like, oh, he still did a bad thing, but you can kind of forgive him a little bit
Where you
more.
wish he was, yeah, a little bit more guilty in that
Yeah,
situation.
or a little bit
Yeah,
more corrupt.
corrupt, yeah. And I think they have done that in recent stories. I don't know exactly, maybe in the Batman, um there was a choose your own adventure style Telltale video game where I think they go into the Wayne's histories of how they're not so um amazing. And Oswald, like, the Penguin is a big part of that, and the Penguin and Bruce had a relationship when they were younger, just a friendship and stuff like that. But this doesn't necessarily go there, and kind of has the Riddler in that spot where he's there when Thomas is running for mayor, and that's where he kind of gets his resentment for the rich and powerful in Gotham. And I like how that's all tied there. But yeah, I'm with you that I think that would be an interesting place. Like, they do give Bruce, he at one point he does think that, like, what have I been doing this for if my father was like this,
Well,
and
the
and,
sins
and
of the
things like that.
father and
Yeah,
are
I think
to
that's an
be taken
interesting
out on the
thing for
on the
Batman,
son.
right? Because
Yeah.
his whole thing is like, I'm doing this because some criminals murdered my parents randomly. And like, um they implicate that Carmine Falcone was the guy who had Thomas killed, which I think is interesting too. which isn't necessarily true. It's just that,
And he
that's how,
and Turturro's character says that it was Salvatore Moroni who did it as well. And so, like, again, like the manipulation of it,
yeah,
but yeah, I think that would have been really interesting character wise for Bruce
this
Wayne
version of
slash
Batman. Yeah.
Batman, because this is a character study as well as a mystery procedural puzzle box kind of movie. And I think if Batman was having an existential crisis about, like, oh, the specifically the person that I thought I was going to become one day, or the person that, I one of the people I cared about the most, that I saw the best of, or I aspire to be, is actually not a good person.
Yeah.
That creates moral conflict. And again, there is a little bit of that there, but it's not enough to be like, oh, like, my dad really was a piece of shit. It's like, no, my dad did the wrong thing, but he,
He made a
ultimately
mistake.
was
Yeah.
doing it for the right reasons. Or he
Yeah.
had, like, he, for his reasons, he was doing something to protect somebody close to him.
Yeah. That's why I hope they go deeper into that in the future, because I think there's something there with the Waynes and the Arkhams, that they're kind of like being the oldest families in Gotham and the state that they put Gotham in. And like, I think there probably is some truth to what the Riddler's saying and what Falcone's saying about Thomas. And I hope they kind of go deeper into that. And that's why I so badly want them to tackle Court of Owls. And
Well,
like, I
that's
know
where
I'll
I
bring
thought
that
that
up.
that
And
was
like,
going to be
dude,
revealed.
I would have been so stoked, because I also thought that's where it was going, where I thought the Riddler was just going to be a red herring the whole time, and that the people, like you said, pulling the strings were going to be the Court of Owls. And I think we could still get that, and I think that might be the overarching, I think even Joker could be a red herring, in the sense that I do think that he might be planting the seeds for the Court of Owls. And with this renewal fund, with the history of the Waynes and the Arkhams, like, and the history of Gotham, and like, that's what the Court of Owls is about, right? Like, I love, it's been a while since I read that arc, almost 10 years ago again, but like, um basically, yeah. So the Court of Owls took notice when billionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne announced his plans to rebuild and reshape Gotham City for the future, which sounds like what the next movie is going to start at. And then it's like, basically, it's involving the Waynes. So Batman discovers the Court of Owls has various secret headquarters throughout hidden rooms in every building established by the Alan Wayne Trust, created by Bruce's great grandfather, Alan Wayne. And then there's stuff about him being as a child, and it involves the Wayne family and the oldest families in Gotham. And I'm like, that's what I want so bad. If I could wish for one thing moving forward, because that's just something we haven't seen in them. Like, they're just new villains, right? They were created in the last 10 years, but they were very well received. There is some silliness there with, like,
Talon.
the Talons, like this undead assassin that they send out and stuff like that, which, like, I don't know how you do that here. You could, but maybe you tweak it a little bit so it's not as silly. But I think and there's some stuff with like a character named Lincoln March that is basically like identical to Bruce, which is part of the Hush storyline too as well. Which, did you see when the
Yeah.
Hush pops up on the screen? I'm like, that's very obvious as well, which is fun. Anyways, that's not necessarily part of this movie, but if I'm theorizing of where the movie could go and how they tackle some of the Wayne stuff and the Gotham stuff in this, I think the Court of Owls could be like a really cool place to take the second movie, and be an overarching, people behind the strings, pulling the strings for those people, like three layers of it, because they're always just lurking, and they just have a cool look with the owl mask, and like, and everyone, it's kind of like, the Skrull invasion in Marvel, where like everyone could have been a Skrull kind of thing. It's like, who could be a part of the Court of Owls? And like, I think you could build that up really well.
Well, the Court of Owls thing as well, like, I didn't know anything about it until you told me about it. But when kind of looking at the images of them wearing those masks, there's this French film called Judix, and it looks like that's where some of the creation or the inspiration came from. And it would also make perfect sense if they wanted to continue on the route of doing detective stories, because that does also sound like that would work well within kind of like the mystery thriller component, because that's another thing. I think it also depends on who you have as the villain in terms of how thematically and narratively the story is told. And if you want to keep doing the mystery thing, like, why not have an underground secret society?
Mm-hmm. There's just some really cool stuff with the Court of Owls that I think you could do from a visual standpoint as well. And it does get very comic booky and silly, and twists on twists on twists, and Batman being trapped in a labyrinth, and like, again, it's still in that puzzle box kind of nature kind of thing too. But if you want to keep the more detective kind of thing, because if he's going around Gotham searching for, and I think these movies will keep that right throughout all of them. Like, I think they're going to be mainly detective stories, so they kind of have to be what you just said, which is like, they have to be kind of him trying to figure things out, and not just like, as flamboyant as the Riddler maybe is in this, like, at times, like, it escalates to a point for him to get there, even though maybe some of the, the serial killy kind of breathing and his voice kind of thing. But like, I do think he still needs to figure it out in these upcoming movies. So that's why the Joker stuff, I think, will be there, but I feel like there always has to be kind of that element of trying to figure out who's actually doing this or what's going on. And I think using Gotham in the state that it's in and having the history there with his family, I think will play a huge part. And I think the Court of Owls could be like a really cool thing to do moving forward. And I know there were hints that they were going to do that in this movie, and obviously that didn't happen, but I'm hoping he's planting the seeds, because I think there could be some really cool stuff there. Yeah, I liked Catwoman's whole plot line in this. Like, I liked her involvement. I love her look. Like, I
It's
mean,
a
which
lot
we
of, it's
also
very
like.
much referencing Batman Year One, where like you
Yeah.
follow Bruce Wayne becoming Batman, but also follow Selena Kyle sort of,
Mhm.
making her journey that's kind of morally more ambiguous and in a gray zone of like, okay, she's not a hero, but she's the anti-hero, because obviously she's still stealing, but kind of her main sort of motivation here is to help a friend who's in trouble. And on the side she'll steal from
Was that her girlfriend? Were they hinting at her like
I think yeah,
bisexuality?
I think there was maybe a fluidity to her sexuality and the character, and I do think that that's interesting as well, where like superhero movies are usually sexually ambiguous at best, and this
This
is
movie's
too.
horny at times, though.
There is a voyeuristic nature to it when you
Oh,
see
Bruce is
Robert
watching her change. Yeah.
change, where it's like, it's gross, but it's kind of supposed to be, because again, Batman's a bit of a pervert, and I think even Robert Pattinson has said that, and it kind of makes sense. It's like, okay, like if it's going to indulge in this stuff, like, why not show, like, again, sort of a moral gray zone for the Batman character? But like, I really, I've never been, not that I don't like her, but I've never been like Zoe Kazan's never been on my radar really. Like
Kravitz.
Kazan. Sorry, Kravitz. Well,
Very different Zoe,
I'm
but
also
yeah.
but Paul Dano is
Sure.
that's
Her
Paul Dano's.
partner.
Yeah. Yeah. Zoe Kravitz is somebody who, like, obviously she was underutilized in X-Men First Class, and she was good in Big Little Lies, but
Mhm.
she's just somebody that is like, I don't know, I've never been like a huge fan of hers, but then watching Steven Soderbergh's Kimmy and now this, I really, really like her in both of these things. And I hope
It's
that
cool.
she's given more and more stuff, because she's been around for a while now. It just kind of feels like she's always, I don't know if she's just, like, maybe she only likes to act sometimes, or maybe she just wasn't getting material that she wanted, but like, this this role does really feel like a breakthrough role for her, and she is so better suited to this compared
Well,
to
it's her
her
second time
performance.
playing Catwoman now, so
Right, yeah, no, I mean, she's been in, I mean, she was even the voice of
Mary
Mary
Jane.
Jane in Into the Spider-Verse. So,
Mhm.
but
Don't
I
forget
think,
the character from Fantastic Beasts too,
yeah. So,
and
like,
Divergent.
but again, you forget about those scenes, or
Yeah, I
those
know. Yeah.
like, they're not great characters. They're just like, so, like, even her role in First Class is just kind of like,
I've been more indifferent. Like, I liked her. Like, I don't think
well, I'm
there's
not saying
anything
I
where I'm
hated her
like,
or anything. I'm just saying
yeah,
I feel the same way, where like I've just never really taken notice of her. But
right.
with Kimmy and this, I feel
I
like
think for me, I really liked her in Big Little Lies. That's
yeah,
probably the last thing. But I think she's great as Catwoman. A great
yeah.
choice. I think her whole arc and her relationship with Batman and Bruce in this, I think, is really great. And I think she's integrated really, really well into into this story. Like, even though it is overstuffed, and it's something we've said in our review and we've talked about here, like there's a lot going on in this movie, and like there's a ton of characters that it throws at you and a ton of villains, and that can kind of sometimes be like too much. But again, I think they do a pretty good job at that, and you can tell that they're world building for these other things, which we can talk about a little bit now before we kind of wrap up. So we do know that like we're getting 2 spin-offs on HBO Max. So we're getting a Gotham PD show, and we're also getting a Penguin spin-off show. So Eric, now seeing this movie, where do you think those series go? Do you think it's pre the Batman? Is it post the Batman? Like I'm fascinated to see what they're going to do with these shows. And like is Jeffrey Wright in the Gotham show,
I think
or
so.
yeah, and then you do have Colin Farrell as Penguin. So I'm assuming it's going to be like after the movie and Penguin starting his rise up as like, a
Becoming the
big,
new
yeah.
Carmine, he's basically taking over the organization completely, where before he was kind of doing it on the side.
And is Pattinson's Batman going to be in either of these shows?
Maybe Pattinson shows up in the Penguin at some point, but I don't know, because Warner Brothers has always been very strange when it comes to how they've used Batman, like even in the Gotham show, which I didn't really
Yeah.
watch, but the way that they shot him and used him in that, they waited till the very end of the series and you never saw him in full regalia. It was mostly kind of like from sort of side angles, the way that you see Michael Myers the first time around in the Halloween movies. And then even with Peacemaker, like hearing that they had Batman as a stand-in but they cut him out. Warner Brothers has been very protective of him being in only movies specifically. So I don't know. I it would be fascinating to watch and
I just don't know how it works without. But the thing that they do getting back into this movie, they set up is like this Batman will work with you kind of thing, right? Like he'll let some things kind of slide, or
yeah.
he'll say like,
He's got
I'll
bigger
give
fish
you,
to fry.
yeah, like I'll leave the leash, a little loose, and I'll like let you kind of do your thing as long as you're not really doing something horrible or something.
You're
So
not
like,
doing something Riddler horrible.
and that's something I always liked in the comics, is that Batman with his rogues gallery, like, because you always had to have them active and escaping Arkham or setting their stuff up, like you had to have this kind of repertoire with them, whether he needs to interview them at Arkham or he lets the Penguin kind of do his thing, because the Penguin's not necessarily like, you know, I don't know, he's just a gangster, I guess, and you can kind of let that go and just say don't go too far kind of thing. So I think that's maybe interesting, and maybe it's just Batman letting the Penguin do his thing and he's like, I got other things to deal with right now, or I don't know. But
Yeah, I'll get back to you at the end
yeah.
and deal with
And
you
then with
later.
Gotham PD, it's just like, what is that show even going to be, right? Like, are you going to just tackle like C and D tier like Batman villains, like street level Batman villains, and like is it
Condiment King?
like, yeah, like
Is it
shit
his
like
time
that?
to
Like
shine?
that could be really funny, but like in a if you just keep like a dark police procedural show about Gotham, like I just don't know how you
and even though it's
differentiate that.
and even though it's not connected and it's a part of the DCEU moving forward, we're also getting Batgirl, which is going to have Michael Keaton's Batman play a role on that show. And then you have
Well, that's a
Brendan.
movie, isn't it?
Oh, I thought it was a series. Maybe it
No, I
is a
think it's a
film.
movie
But
on HBO Max.
right, so it's a TV movie.
Sure.
It is kind of. But you have that film, which is going to also be on HBO Max, either probably next year.
Do you think this will confuse people?
Yes, I do. I think it is
Will the
confusing.
Flash fix everything?
No. I still think people need to be spoon fed when it comes to like constantly reminding people that this isn't connected to that, and especially when it comes to comic book continuity. I think
Like,
that
why is that Batman different than this Batman kind of thing? Like,
yeah, or why aren't the X-Men still a part of this Marvel
I
universe.
think that's fine because people don't think that hard about it. Like, but I think when you have two ongoing things at the same time, people are like, when we're so used to everything being connected now, too.
Well, I said the X-Men though because the New Mutants thing I think did
Sure.
confuse some people, where like the New Mutants was coming out when the MCU
was already, and
Yeah.
Disney already had control of it. I get what you're saying there. Yeah, I forgot that movie existed. So, I got a message from my mom as we're a very DC centric text message as we're recording this. She goes, "We were about to watch Justice League, but we weren't sure if we had to watch other movies before it to get the gist." And I'm like, you kind of need to watch Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. And
what
then
Justice League are they watching?
God, I should tell them to watch the Snyder cut because I would love to get my dad's thoughts on the Snyder cut. If it was black and white and 4:3, I should tell them to watch that version.
Settle down for what, like 4 hours?
4 hours, yeah. So they're like, okay, we switched to Cry Macho. It's like, sweet.
Yep. I mean,
Sick.
Clint Eastwood
Staying in
kind
the
of
Warner
is
Brothers
a
family, yeah.
superhero.
So, yeah. Eric, anything else you want to tackle? Spoiler filled? Like, I'm trying to think. The movie, there's so much in this movie.
It's
that
so
I'm like,
densely plotted, where like I feel like a lot of the movie is more plot driven than it is character driven, where it's like, okay, we have to set up all of these, you know, pieces of the puzzle to get to the bigger picture at the end and where we're going. But when we reveal these pieces, you know, and how we reveal these pieces, we won't necessarily have them connect, you know, go from one scene to another and subsequently kind of connect them. We'll introduce this piece here, and then we'll leave you with it, and we'll go and do something else that will ultimately be a part of it, but the tapestry, you know, it'll be another connection later on. And so you're getting all these pieces being revealed bit by bit, and then at the end of it all you have, you know, it being put together essentially. And I feel like some of those subplots and characters get lost in how kind of jam-packed it is. Like it's like, okay, we haven't seen Catwoman for 20 minutes now, or 30 minutes. We haven't seen the Riddler in a while. We haven't seen any of the stuff with the mayoral candidacy and the running of that. And you know, and then it comes back at a point where it's like, oh yeah, that's still something that they need to tie up or bring back into the fold again. And then that's where I think it starts to kind of lose you a little bit, because it is so ambitious and dense in its storytelling that it would almost be better to watch this unfold in, like, you know, 8 episodes or something like that, than just like watch it all crammed into nearly
or
3
multiple
hours.
viewings. Like, I feel like we said this in our other review, that I am looking forward to watching it again, because I feel like maybe it'll play a little bit better for those things of
I'm
like,
still not sure if the pacing is going to be great, because I do think that's the other thing that I will be critical of with this movie, is that you do feel those 2.5 hours, and it does at times feel sluggish and morose, and part of that is intentional.
well,
But
it's
I
3
think,
hours.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
2.5 hour. It's 2.5, isn't it? Like,
No,
or
it's
two.
3. It's 176 minutes. It's
So
almost
yeah. So, but
180 minutes would be 3 hours, right?
and
255.
I'm thinking about that because having watched Drive My Car twice and feeling that pacing is perfect in terms of like how it moves and how it gets from point A to point B, it doesn't feel like 3 hours. Like, it is long, but you don't feel the length in the way that you do with this. Like
I will say that this kept me engaged, but I felt the length. So that's like kind of back and forth. Like, I did feel the length, but I was constantly engaged with the material. So like, I never was like, fucking end, Jesus. Like, I was never at that point ever, or like going, okay, let's start to wrap this shit up. But I did go like, there's a hell of a lot of movie in here, and I
right,
did
but
notice the length.
I did feel that they were, I didn't feel like, oh, like, get to the point, but I did feel it's like, okay, they are kind of dragging this moment out or this moment out a little bit. Or there are some scenes where it's like, oh, this, you know, like the police commissioner is now dead, and it's like, oh, that's just okay, he's
Oh,
now
they
dead.
cut
When
that
do we
whole thing out. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure there was a whole a whole thing there, but they're like, do we need the commissioner part? Like, we can just
No,
say
we
he
got him in the
killed at
jigsaw
gym. Like, yeah,
contraption. We
yeah,
got enough,
yeah.
you know.
We don't need to show how he does that, but
Yeah.
the one moment I mentioned in our review, like, I think the opening of this movie rips. Like, I really like it, even though it is maybe for you
It
too
was
over the top in this.
overhyped.
Like,
I think with Robert Pattinson talking about like the opening scene specifically kind of being almost like a shot from either Blow Up or The Conversation, where it's like you're
mhm.
watching you're again the voyeuristic nature of it all. You're watching, you know, a POV scene and hearing the deep breathing. Like I was thinking it was going to be something a little bit more because it's coming from Robert Pattinson, who does a lot of indie movies that are kind of outside of the
Sure.
mainstream. And I was like, oh, are we gonna get like a weird kind of like, you know, Claire Denis fuck box scene that is almost like
So I didn't even hear those interviews, but I
so
just like,
abstract? But
yeah,
yeah,
I just like the reveal of the Riddler in that first scene as well, and like the voiceover journal kind of stuff. Like, I'm like, oh shit, this all, like, I was in right away, and I think it carries that, and yeah, I think it's a really solid like building block and starting ground for what I hope is a trilogy from Matt Reeves, because like, as much as we said, like, I'm like, I think his Two Apes movies I liked more than this. You mentioned Let Me In. I'd have to go back and rewatch that, but like, I do think he is one of the better working Hollywood studio guys that, you know, like you said, takes some artistic risks and tries to make things his own, and actually puts a lot of himself and emotion into his movies, that I am very excited to see where he takes this, and whether he goes the route that I want with the Court of Owls or Batman villains we haven't seen before, because that's another thing we didn't necessarily touch on other than the Joker.
Condiment King.
Yeah, the Joker stuff is like, we've seen Riddler before, we've seen Falcone before, we've seen Penguin before, we've
Well, we've
seen
seen
Catwoman.
Catwoman and the
Um,
Penguin in Batman
yeah,
Returns before, right?
together, yeah.
You
So like,
know,
it's it's I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, his main rogues gallery is only so large, I guess, right? Like, in his
well,
big
he's
top
got the
tier
most, I
villains,
think,
like
sort of
iconic villains.
eclectic group
Yeah.
of villains where, like, again, some of them might not fit in the more kind of grounded manner, but you know, there are still characters like, well, I don't think we'll see Clayface in this, but like Clayface was a character as a kid on the
I
90s
love
animated
Clayface, but yeah.
series that I love, but that's not going to happen. You know, you have characters like Mad Hatter, and that's another character that works better in almost I'm surprised Burton never, maybe Burton
Never
did, maybe
did
he
him.
was gonna do it for a third film, but you know, he got his jollies off with Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, and I think we
um
already got an excellent Black Mask in Ewan McGregor, so like, I don't
yeah,
think
and
you
Brendan
go that.
Fraser is playing Firefly, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I
We've
mean, like,
gotten Hugo Strange is a big
yeah,
one. Like, I think, like, if you are going to, and Hush, like, which they did, there was the Hush on the screen in this, but like, um I think you could do Hush, but then that would be very, I don't know how you would do that well. But you have Hugo Strange, you have Hush, yeah, like you mentioned, Mad Hatter. We've had a Killer Croc, but that wouldn't work. Man Bat. Um,
now if Man Bat was a
um,
lawyer like he was in
yeah, you could tackle Mr. Freeze in a better way.
and that's
Like,
something that Matt Reeves has, somebody asked him about that, and he did say that that is a storyline that he does like.
okay, because
And
you could do Mr. Freeze well, like, because I
yeah,
think, like, in Harley Quinn, the animated series, I think does Mr. Freeze super, super
yeah.
well.
Well, also
Um,
Man Bat as a lawyer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go watch the Harley Quinn series; it's great.
Well, Kite
Um,
Man, who was also mentioned in
yeah, and Suicide or
Peacemaker.
Peacemaker. So Kite Man exists in the DCEU, which is amazing.
I would like to
Um,
see Poison Ivy, but I would like to see Poison Ivy in the DCEU with Harley
Harley
Quinn,
Quinn,
because
yeah,
like I feel like there was that time where they were going to do Gotham City Sirens, and like that would
yeah.
have been interesting. So
Which
I
I
don't
think
know.
they still could,
Yeah,
but I know Birds of Prey sort of underperformed, right?
yeah,
But
and
then
it's
Suicide
so
Squad
strange
did.
that Margot Robbie's like one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and like she is so game to continue on with Harley Quinn,
And
and
she's so good at it too. Yeah.
Warner Brothers is so like Like even when it was critically acclaimed with Birds of Prey, it was just kind of like, it didn't do as well as the other films.
Yeah, we're getting Two-Face, or at least Harvey Dent in the
Yeah.
next one. Like,
But even that's
absolutely.
repetitive, right?
Yes. Scarecrow we've gotten, like, so we're Ra's al Ghul. You mentioned Poison Ivy. Like, Victor Zsasz is someone who could work in this, but he's kind of so generic
But we
that,
also
like,
got him in Birds of Prey as well, right? With
oh,
Christmas.
right. Yeah. Chris Messina, right?
Yeah.
And then ventriloquist is someone we haven't really gotten. Then you have like the smaller Batman villains.
Yeah, like Louis the Lilac,
Calendar Man, Clayface,
Egghead.
Clock King. God, who am I thinking? Like,
I mean,
I love
Ratcatcher would have been a really
Ratcatcher,
good
yeah.
villain, I think, in a way.
James Jr. would be good, but it's too similar to this version of the Riddler. So
That's where the Night of Owls, I think, would work well, because at least it would be like, it wouldn't. You could have kind of, but then again, I could see people complaining that it's not like a central villain, like it's not like somebody that they can like project.
But I think you need to, like, that sounds so cool to me, and that's why I'll keep pitching this, is like, let them do something new that most people don't know about. Like, let you go, holy fuck, these guys are really cool, and the talent is cool. Like, you can do talent in a way where he's not like an undead zombie guy, like, and like, or you could do that in something that's really cool. I always like the Batman villain Onomatopoeia. Kevin Smith created him. I don't think you could ever make that work in live action. Eric, I don't know if you're familiar with Onomatopoeia, but like,
No.
I just liked his outfit. He wore all black, and he had this black mask that had like like white circles on it. And basically his thing was that it works in comics because his name is Onomatopoeia, because he would say aloud a lot of those bubbles you would have in comics. So like, think of like the 60s Batman, like the pow, wham, like he would just say those in disturbing ways after he would like kill someone or whatever. Like if he shot them, he would just say bam,
Bang.
or bang, but it would work in a comic format, where I don't know if that would work in live action.
So
Like,
he's all black with a white swirl.
Also, I'll
because
send
you know what
his
that
design.
sounds like to me. That sounds like the character. It almost sounds like Kevin Smith just ripped off the character from Batman Beyond, the Ink character, because the Ink character.
It's possible.
Look her up, because she was kind of like Terry's Catwoman. In a way, and she also has like a swirl or something, and she's like all black. So
yeah, I just
Kevin Smith,
photo,
a bit of a hack.
Stop. I like Kevin Smith, but
I do too. But I think he puts his foot in his mouth more times than not.
Yeah,
this does kind of look like that character.
Onomatopoeia started as a Green Arrow villain, and then became like a main Batman villain. And I don't know. I always really liked Onomatopoeia. I just don't think you could do it.
Okay, I'm looking up Ink right now.
Sure.
Because I want to.
Batman Who Laughs is really interesting, but that's when you're getting into multiverse.
Okay, it's not completely the same. She just had like a white blotch, but like I'm just sending you a photo of it now.
Everyone can look these up. Sorry, we don't have visual cues for you guys. I'm not gonna go in and edit that. Oh yeah, that is pretty similar. Maybe they would be lovers.
Yeah, or maybe Kevin Smith is a hack.
Shut up. My parents, update on Cry Macho. I think we're gonna turn it off. It's not very good.
Tell them to watch Malignant.
No, oh my god. My mom could maybe be into Malignant, but I do not think my dad would watch it.
See,
anyways,
that would be an amazing Batman villain. Gabriel,
man.
Warner Brothers owns them both. Bring them in.
Crossover, baby, the multiverse. Anyways, anything else you want to tackle, Eric, before we kind of wrap up this spoiler cast? Anything that we missed? I know there's a hell of a lot of movie.
It's a good film. And again, maybe it's the older you get as well, and the more of these movies you see, where like going into this, I was excited, but at the same time, I think there was a little bit of burnout, and I talked about it in the review, where like the mental health of Batman has always been something that has kind of like become more aware of that as I get older. And I've always loved Batman, and he's always been my favorite comic book character, and you know, DC wise, he's been my favorite, and I find myself liking Spider-Man more and more, because like there's less like worry about him being weirdly exploited as a character because of his mental illness and sort of what drives him. And with Batman, it's like, okay, like part of it is like, you know, his psychosis is being enabled by his, you know, financial stability and you know, the few people that know who he is around him kind of, you know, basically giving him, you know, license to do what he does without really, you know, truly saying, maybe Bruce, you should get some help, you know. And that is something that it's like you become more and more aware of that as you get older, and you start to kind of like, you know, whether you suffer from depression or you know, have other mental health issues, it's just a weird thing. It's just, it's, and like thinking about like how this character again is dealing with his own health issues, and you can say, okay, it's a comic book movie, but it is a big part of the character's sort of background and sort of build as who he is.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point to bring up. And I think it's something that I, you know, you hope that they tackle in like an important way in whether it's this trilogy or something moving forward. But I totally understand where you're coming from on that.
I mean, they
standpoint.
do analyze it a little bit in Batman Forever with Nicole Kidman's Dr. Chase Meridian
Yeah.
psychoanalyzing Val Kilmer's Bruce Wayne. It's like, you think it's a bat when he looks at the ink blot, and it's like,
Yeah.
it looks like a bat.
Because
And
I
it
think
does look like a bat.
and
It is
maybe
a
that
bat.
I know Hugo Strange is a villain, but like that you could go deeper into that with maybe that character
Yeah,
or
BD
something.
Wong played him in Gotham. Bring BD Wong in to play him in the film.
Oh, did he? Did you
Yeah.
watch any of Gotham?
No, I didn't. I saw a couple clips online, and those clips basically feel like what that one scene is with Barry Cogan in that one sequence. Like it feels like all of that throughout that entire series. But they also had Clayface on that show too, which was terrible.
I've never seen a single episode or
I
any of
haven't
them.
either, but just what I've seen clip wise, like on YouTube, and I was just like, how did this show go on for so long? Like, who was watching it? But again, Batman related stuff always does really, really well. Like it's almost like a failsafe kind of thing for Warner Brothers, and I think that's why they're so protective of the character's
Mhm.
image and just identity in general. Where it's like
Mhm.
they know that no matter what they make that is Batman branded, it'll do well, or people will be interested in it, and that's why they're probably really also spreading Batman out with these two shows, and then also the Batgirl movie, and you know, whatever else is going to come down the line, because I'm sure we'll get more of the DCEU Michael Keaton stuff in the next 5 years or so. Because I mean, let's be honest, Michael Keaton is of an age now, so it's like you want to kind of take advantage of him as much as possible
I
while
think we're
he's
getting a
still
Batman
physically
Beyond
fit.
movie too.
Oh, I do too, unless Batgirl becomes that, which I could see
Yeah.
that as well.
You're not wrong. You're
Yeah.
not wrong. I mean, that's ultimately what character he's going to be playing to. But I mean, he's in the suit still in this, right? But like,
Yeah.
I think eventually you get him out of it. And if you want to introduce a younger Batman to the DCEU, if you're still doing a shared universe thing after the Flash, like I feel like you go into Batman Beyond, and you have Batgirl as well. But like, yeah, I mean, I'm down. I mean, I like what DC's been doing lately. Like Peacemaker fucking rules. Like, I think this is a good. Again, I'm not. I'm totally with you with like how many iterations of Batman we've gotten. That like I was very excited. I do really like this movie, but you know, we have gotten a lot of it. So, you know, I'm open to seeing what Reeves does. And before we go, Eric, where do you, I've already said what I think or what I would want. Where would you want it to go in the state Gotham's in, underwater, what it is? I know it's this fresh start you've talked about. Joker is established in Arkham. Riddler's there. Like, where do you think they go? Do they go immediately into Joker? Or do you think that they do
I
something
would like
else?
them to do Night of Owls, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like I
Court of
think like
Owls. Yeah.
it's Court of Owls, Night of
Yeah.
Owls, Court of
I think
Owls,
that might be one of the arcs of Night of the Owls. Yeah, you're not
because
wrong.
because it's like, okay, you know, the surface has been flooded, but below there's still problems.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I think could be really cool. So we're on the same page. Thank you all for listening or watching. We hope you guys enjoyed. We did 2.5 hours of Batman content and the movie's not even out yet. So I'm sure we'll be talking about it more. I mean, it's out by the time you guys are seeing this, but as we're recording, it's still a week away. But um, I can't wait to see it again. You might see our thoughts evolve. We'll talk about it probably a lot on the main show, probably after we've seen it once or twice more. Like after this, like I know Eric and I are both seeing it. We saw it in IMAX too, which we never mentioned the first time, but it was a Limax theater. So we are seeing it in a real laser projection Scotiabank IMAX theater. So pretty stoked about that and seeing it with our friend Mike Bunce and my fiance Nevis. So I'm excited to see it again and just kind of see how our thoughts evolve, what better or for worse, whether you hate Riddler more, whether you
Will I drink his brew
um,
after a second viewing? We'll find
still
out.
gotta find I drunk his brew, baby.
Oh, that sounds so gross.
And I just can't wait to see where it goes next. So,
and we should also, I mean, you mentioned it in the regular show, but yes, Little Caesars does make a
yeah,
appearance.
that is a big cameo. Thank you, Eric. That is important to bring up, and we touched on it, and I almost started to wrap up the show, but we're back on track because we did spend a lot of time in our Uncharted review talking about Papa John's, and I think
And Papa
that
John's
was
does have a promotion as well for the Batman.
in the UK. So I'm wondering, is there going to be a Papa John's cut like there was a Pizza Hut cut of Demolition Man?
Oh, that would be
Like,
good. Oh, Taco Bell and
because there was no Taco Bell in Europe, I think. And people who are fans of Kind of Funny, you go watch me on Screencast. There's a new episode, or listen. Timur Hussein, who often shows up on Kind of Funny content, loves Demolition Man, and he talks about all the time the Pizza Hut cut of Demolition Man because in Europe
the Hut cut.
They had no Taco Bell, so they had to cut around it, and it was Pizza Hut in other territories. So I'm wondering in the UK, is that Little Caesars billboard a Papa John's billboard? I bet you it is.
That's a good question, Matt. Well, we'll have to, if anybody is watching or
anyone
listening
in
to
the
this in the UK, please let us know because this is important information.
This is film journalism. Like,
the other thing I did like Easter egg wise, there's a grocery store that's being robbed called Good Times Grocery.
Yes, that's incredible. Other Easter eggs. We mentioned there is a Court of Owls reference with, I think, very clearly on
and
the front
Hugo
of the
Strange.
cards. Hugo Strange very clearly on the front of the cards. The other cards I don't think had references, but those two were noticeable. The Little Caesars billboard is not subtly, it's very clearly there.
I mean, when
but
Batman's eating a calzone, it's a little much in that one scene. You remember,
when the Riddler, when he opens a pizza box and to the Batman is written in grease on the box, it was a little bit much, but no, way better product placement in this, which is exactly what we predicted when we talked about it being like, I bet you it'll be a billboard or a storefront in Gotham. So Little Caesars does exist in this Gotham City, which is kind of funny to think about. But
I mean, it is about anti-capitalism as well, which is kind of interesting because it's almost like, again, going to my point with the Riddler, it's like having, the cake and eat it too, where it's like talking about
have your calzone and eat it too.
Yeah. Break down the corporate walls, but we'll still include, promotional
a bright
material.
Orange sign that says Little Caesars.
Yeah.
Like in an establishing shot. But
and
the
it will
restraint
be interesting as well with social media, how that might date this movie in some time from now. Like I think in like even 2 or 3 years from now, like I'd like to go back and watch this and be like, oh yeah, not just the technology, but
the
like
live streaming stuff and like all of that. Like I know that's very hot right now, and I thought that we way back talked about the hey everyone or whatever.
Yeah.
What's up, guys?
But the Joker did that as well, right? With
yes.
in the Dark Knight. So
but that was more like on a TV. Yeah, I mean he did,
and I thought that was so much more better. And how he
Eric hates this movie. Tell everyone. Eric hates the Batman.
Maybe I just don't like Paul. No, I like Paul Dano, but I don't like Paul Dano when he's used like this. But yeah, I thought
you don't like double Dano. You like single Dano.
Yes.
But I totally get that. But
and don't be married to somebody with the same first name as your co-star and the same initials. Yeah. Yeah. I'm married to
Zoe K. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Thank you all for listening or watching. We really, really do appreciate it. Like I mentioned, you can check me out on the most recent episode of Kinda Funny Screencast, where we talked about what we've been watching in 2022 on TV. So we talk about Yellow Jackets, Murderville, The After Party. I talk about Last One Laughing, which is I'm really, really enjoying on Prime Video right now. And more. So go check that out. We have other reviews we would love for you guys to check out, like No Exit. Go check that one out. The review, maybe not the movie. And our spoiler-free review of the Batman. There's some other stuff up there. I don't know what the hell else we got up there, Eric. What do we got? What have we reviewed? What movies?
Uncharted.
Oh, Turning Red, Uncharted. Yeah. You guys can check those out.
Our Papa John's conversation in Uncharted.
Yeah. So go check all those out. March is going to be a little wonky because the Batman's and Turning Red are the two biggest movies of the month.
And we got some stuff. We got After Yang, which will have, speaking Colin Farrell.
We will hang out with our Yangs out.
Yep.
Also
Colin got an invite to watch Dicktown on FX. So
sick.
It's male genital heavy with Jackass Forever and After Yang and Dicktown.
And then speaking of Jackass
Little
Forever,
Dicky.
Now on Disney Plus. Go check out the most recent draft of the Untitled Movie Podcast, where we talk about Jackass Forever and a bunch of different things. So go check that out as well. So Untitled Movie Podcast, Untitled Movie Reviews on YouTube and podcast services. One-stop shop. Just head over to Letterboxd. It's Untitled_movies. You can find all of our social medias, all of our videos, all of our audio podcasts, our ratings, all that jazz over there. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com. And you can follow me on all of those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martian. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Gotta get me that
man.
Bat calzone.
Calzone, baby. I ate too much pizza tonight, too. Bye.